Today we're speaking with Shep Hyken, customer service expert, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of several books including The Cult of the Customer, The Amazement Revolution, and Amaze Every Customer Every Time. Shep works with companies and organizations that seek to build loyal relationships with their customers and employees, and he's working with clients ranging from companies with less than 50 employees to Fortune 100. Shep, thanks for taking time to speak with us today.
I'm excited to be here, Mark. Thank you.
That's great. Well, let's dive right in. I was wondering if you could tell me, how do you build a powerful customer experience strategy, and what are mistakes to avoid?
Well, that's a pretty big question, and how much time do we have today?
As much as you want.
7 hours?
Yeah.
So, seriously, though, the experience strategy, and people recognize what I do is I do customer service and experience. They're not the same, but many times they overlap. And I think that today, when people think of service, they think of very frontline focused. However, I believe it goes deep into the organization. Same thing with the customer experience. Part of the customer experience is the service, but it's also the total interaction, the total any type of interaction that customer has with your company at any level whatsoever is part of their experience. And it could be people to people. It could be the way you package a product and mail it to them. And, when they open the box, what does it look like? What's inside? How is it packed? Anyway, let's go ahead and give you my philosophy of what it takes to get there. And that is a very simple six-step process. Number one is leadership must define what that experience is going to be. A customer-focused company that's focused on service and experience starts at the very top with the leadership saying, this is what we want our customers to experience. Once they can communicate this articulately and simplistically, and that's a key word, simplistically, I typically ask my clients to try to create a one-sentence vision of what the customer experience should be. The Ritz-Carlton's famous one is 9 words long. We're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. It's very easy for every employee to understand it when they come to work there. So number one is to define it at the leadership level. Number two is to communicate it to everybody, and they must understand it. And it can't be flavor of the month or this is this year's theme. It's when you decide what that vision is going to be, until it maybe years from now is not really what you want to achieve, you keep it consistently in front of everybody. So communication is number two. Number three, you train everybody to understand what that vision is, and you train, by the way, different people differently. You're going to train somebody on the front line completely different than somebody in the warehouse who may never have any interaction with the customer. But they are involved in creating that experience. Same thing with the accounting department, the HR department, the sales department, every department, IT, any department. They are responsible for creating an experience either for somebody inside their organization or somebody outside, hence the customer. So that's number three, is training. Number four is if you're a leader, you need to demonstrate it. And on a personal level, you need to express and be a role model for what that experience should be. Number five is if a leader sees it going out of alignment, they must get it back into alignment. Either that's a person, it's a department, it could be an entire region of a company or a division of a company. We work with clients that are as small as 50 people up to 50,000 or even more. We work with some of the Fortune 50 companies, and a client once said, how long is this little process you have going to take us to implement? And he said he had 35,000 employees, and I said, it's going to take 6 years. When do you want to start? And then the final step is to celebrate when it works. So real quickly, you define it, you communicate it, you train people to it. Leadership acts as a role model. They keep it, number five, in alignment. Number six is when it works, you must let everybody know and celebrate the success of your vision, being seen by not just you, but by the customer as well.
So it sounds like that we're all part of the customer experience at every level.
At every level. Nobody is left out. And if they think they are, somebody once said, if you left or you stopped working and did your job, how long would it take for someone to notice that you weren't there or you weren't doing your job? And if nobody notices, see ya. It's not long before it's all over anyway. But I believe that customer experience is everybody's job. And at any time, if somebody doesn't believe they're involved, what we suggest our clients do is create a journey map of the customer experience. every interaction they have, every interaction. Again, that's not just people to people. If they receive, and I'll tell you who's famous for this. Steve Jobs said, let's make the packaging so incredible on our products that alone is an experience that they will enjoy. Not just the people, not just the product itself, but even the packaging. So somebody's involved with that in the company. And if you create a journey map from the moment a customer thinks about doing business with you, or isn't quite even, and if you think about it, if you're in marketing, you're going to try to get a customer to think about doing business with you, to the time they actually receive the product, maybe have questions, repeat buyer, that kind of thing. You can take a look at all the frontline touch points. Those are at the top. And behind them are what I call impact points. That's what's behind the scenes that's driving it. So if a customer calls or goes online and interacts with either an employee or a website and orders a product, and that product is accepted, or that order is accepted, and now somebody in the warehouse has to go and pull it off a shelf and put it in a box and wrap it up properly, and then it gets sent over to shipping, and shipping makes sure it's all done properly with addressed, and it goes out. There are a lot of people that touch that package. The customer only knows one thing. I ordered it online or from a person, and it showed up 4 days later. They don't see the 25 different activities that happen behind the scenes and all the different people involved. And I can show you on a typical journey map with a client that every single person in a company is going to somehow touch that customer in some way. Behind the scenes, it may be minimal, but their part of it is in that interaction, or behind the scenes, in what I call the impact points.
Sounds very crucial to the whole process.
Yeah, if you don't do it, and by the way, that's one of the exercises. If you want a little homework, I would say sit down and journey map out the customer experience at the top line, and then figure out all the different departments and all the different people that drive that experience behind the scenes. It's not an easy exercise. You're going to sit down with a lot of people and spend a lot of time on it, but when you get it, you'll see everybody's included. There's nobody or no department that's left out.
If customer service is the new marketing, what is the key to the art of amazing your customers?
The key is when a customer walks away, they'll go, wow, I love doing business with them, and I want to tell others about the experience. And, everybody thinks that, I use that word amazing all the time. Amazing isn't super difficult to achieve. When you talk about wowing the customer, that's another term. I don't use the word wow. I use the word amaze. You could say it's the same thing. But to me, if you go over the top and deliver that wow experience, for me, amazing is just something that's better than expected, a tiny bit better than average, and it's consistent all of the time. So when you can create and deliver a consistent experience that meets and maybe just a little bit exceeds that customer's expectations consistently, they're going to want to come back. When they come back, they're going to talk about you. They'll tell your friends, this is where I do business. They'll tell the colleagues they work with, other people. They go to a conference. They tell people who they enjoy doing business with, because there's a consistency and there's an expectation that's typically met. I mean, that's what great and an amazing service is a level of service and a level of experience that is consistently and predictably better than average. And you do that, and that's your best marketing strategy.
I read just maybe last week that I think it was Bain & Company, which is a major consulting company.
Yep.
They said that 80% of companies say they deliver superior customer service. However, 8% of people out there think that these same companies actually deliver superior customer service. Quite a disproportion between the two.
Yeah, there's a big spread. I'm actually this morning was writing an article that it's not quite that big of a doom and gloom spread between 80% and 8%. But I think whether the numbers are 100% accurate or even half accurate, they are still making a big statement, aren't they?
Yeah.
That there is a big discrepancy between the companies that say, oh yeah, we give great customer service, and yet they really don't. I'm doing a study that was just released by In Contact, which is a company that is owned by NICE, N-I-C-E, on the New York Stock Exchange. And they're basically in the call center customer support world. and they were doing the discrepancy between, and they did a big study. They looked at lots of executives, I think from over 300 support centers is what they interviewed, and then they went out and interviewed thousands of customers to see, I believe it was a pretty big number of customers to see, if there was a gap in the thinking, and there is. There's a gap in virtually every area of customer service, and that's kind of disappointing. But I do have a point to make with this. As disappointing as it is, you want to close the gap. What happens is, we're quick to respond to our customers. And I'll ask customers, what would you like your companies when you tweet out a question or email in a question or text in a question, what would be a good response time? And they're all going to say, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours. And the companies say, well, we try to do it within 6 to 7 hours. Well, alone is a big discrepancy. Federal Express, great company, says we want to respond to our customers who send something to us via social media, ideally within 20 minutes. I think that's their ideal, but their goal is, always under an hour. At least that's what they told me informally what their goal is when I was working with them last year. So I know this, and I know I've gotten a little bit off the topic of your question, but at the end of the day, you've got to exceed these expectations by even just the tiniest bit. And when you do that, you close that gap between what a company thinks is happening and what the customer, their reality is. By the way, their perception is the reality. You can't mess with that. You might think you deliver the best service in the world. They're the judge and the jury to determine whether you do.
Yeah, it's what they say about you, not what you say.
Right. That's tweetable, by the way. That's very good.
According to the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, companies with less than 20 employees make up almost 90% of businesses. But for SMBs like these with limited resources, what are some of the more crucial areas to focus on for creating amazing customer experiences?
So here's my take on that. I think that the smaller companies have the biggest advantage of anybody because they're so nimble. If they spot that they've started to lose their grasp of what good service is, they can change on a dime because they only have to change 20 people or less. So let's start there in that they have the best opportunity to create the culture quickest. I mean, they can turn a company around in weeks, not years. So that's number one. Number two, what can they do that's cost effective? Well, I can put in a plug for my latest book, but
feel free.
The truth of the matter is, I believe that training is crucially important. Whether it's a book that everybody reads, and then a manager or a leader sits down and let's go through one chapter at a time together, and you go through and you work through it that way. Some type of training, online training. There's lots of inexpensive resources out there that you can get that literally even showing videos. Very inexpensive. Go to my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, and actually if you go to sheptv.com, it'll take you straight to my YouTube channel. And there's 500 videos on customer service. If you want an inexpensive way to train your people, take some time, pick out the 12 videos that you like the best, and once a month, show that 4-minute video or so, and then sit down and talk about it for 15 minutes, and there you've got an amazing 20-minute customer service program, and it didn't cost you anything.
That sounds like great advice. You've stated in the past that customer service is not a department, but a philosophy to be embraced by everyone. To effectively implement across an organization, it seems that there'd be a need for someone to champion this effort. And with smaller businesses, people often wear so many hats. So what should these individuals need to know if they're to instill this kind of thinking within their culture, and what are some best practices towards managing it?
So number one, you said it right. Service is not a department. It's not, if you're in a small organization, it's not a half a dozen people or even just 2 people that deal with customer issues. It's everybody's job. One idea is, especially in a small company, you can do this, is say, hey, everybody, you have a shift on the customer service desk. Every week, each one of you are going to spend 2 hours working customer service, just so that you stay in complete touch with the customer and what the reality is. And if you can hire 20 people in all the different areas that you need that are also great at talking to customers on the telephone or dealing with them via email, chat, dealing with it even on a social media level, then I think you've got an amazing employee. So that's one idea. And the other simplistic idea, as I mentioned this before, is to do that journey map and show them where they fall in the customer's journey, even if it's behind the scenes, because it's so important that they know what their impact is on the customer. The next thing you might consider doing is letting the employees know what the average customer is worth. And when they start to understand what the average customer value is, they'll make better decisions. Example of that would be, if let's just use a simple consumer example, because everybody goes to the grocery store. If the average person spent $100 a week on groceries, that's $50,000 plus a year. I'm sorry, $5,000 plus a year. If they lived in the neighborhood for 10 years, that's $50,000. So if once in a great while, that customer, who I know has been living in the neighborhood for 10 years, been worth $50,000 to me, comes in and says, you know what, that piece of meat you sold me the other day for $8 didn't taste very good. Give him another $8 piece of meat because you're jeopardizing a $50,000 customer. And not only that, give your people permission to do that type of thing without having to go and ask the manager. There's an old saying or an old adage in business. Not a lot of people know about it, but it's been around for a long time. And the concept is 1 to say yes and 2 to say no. In other words, if you hire good people and you train them right and you tell them to go out there and do a great job, use good judgment, do the best, you have permission to do what you think is right. And if for some reason you aren't sure what to do, you can come and see me. Or if you need to say no, if you truly feel you need to say no to somebody, then really that's the time to come and see me. Let's see if we can teach you how to say yes the next time. So it's 1 to say yes, 2 to say no. It's kind of a fun concept.
It's an interesting concept of knowing when to say yes and when to bring it to the management. I suppose a lot of people... sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I went to a restaurant down, I was on vacation with my wife and one of my daughters, and there was another family that we saw down there that we're friends with. We decided to have breakfast with them the next morning. And all the breakfast tables that were available were set for 4 people, yet there were 6 of us. Yet there were lots of tables that we could push together. So we asked if we could push 2 tables together. And the girl that was helping us said, I need to go check with my manager.
Oh.
Are you kidding me? Okay. And so guess what? The manager came over and the manager helped slide the table over, okay? The next day we met them for breakfast again, same scenario, and we asked the same girl, can we push the tables together again? And she goes, I have to check with my manager.
Wow.
Unbelievable. The moment the manager did it the first time should have been the last time she ever had to ask, because the manager said this is okay to do demonstrated by actually doing it. And I'm very frustrated when I see people put in the position of not being able to have an authority or being empowered to do something as simple as that. And believe me, it happens all the time, and you see it. You'll become more aware of it now if you've listened to this interview or read the interview. You'll become more aware of these situations, and it's going to drive you crazy.
It's not exactly an executive decision, and probably the more you empower your employees, the better off everyone involved would be. Right.
So there was a gentleman, he's owned an Ace hardware store, and he called it, the 1 to say yes, 2 to say no thing. He called it the best policy he ever implemented. He said he eliminated 70 to 80% of the questions that his employees came to ask him when he gave them permission to just do what they thought was right. Now, there is a key. There's a little more to it if you want to get into it briefly. When somebody does something that they haven't done before, after they've done it, they should come to a manager and they could say, this is what I did. And the manager should praise them or teach them what to do next time. And the next time there's a meeting with the team, and you should have team meetings ongoing at least once a week, if not more often, these team meetings are opportunities to say, let me tell you what Mark did last week. This is a perfect example of how I want you guys to do, whatever it is. And use it as a learning opportunity, not just for the individual, but for the entire group as well.
Absolutely. One more quick question for you. How important how important do you think online reviews and reputations are for businesses, and what do you recommend to businesses for acquiring more reviews to improve their online presence?
Wow. Well, so how important are they? I think that word-of-mouth marketing is becoming more and more important. The reviews are becoming more and more important. If you go on Amazon and you're thinking about buying a book, I'll guarantee you look at the reviews. If you go on to a shopping site where there's electronics, you're going to be comparing different items to different items, and you're going to be looking at those reviews. Reviews are extremely important. However, that doesn't mean they have to be 5-star reviews across the board. If you've got 500 reviews and every single one is a 5-star review, that almost looks suspicious. And to back it up, Northwestern University out of Chicago, their business school, did a study, and what they found is a 4.2 to 4.4, which on a 5-star review has more credibility and a better response than a perfect 5.0 on a number of reviews. Now, I would hate to see a bunch of 1s and 2s, but I think it's important that to not get all hung up if once in a while you get somebody that's unhappy. I also think you have to take reviews as a company. You have to take that. It's very important to respond to every review, but you also have to take some of them with a grain of salt. There's a famous restaurant up in the Napa Valley area in California. I read about this story, and I was really shocked that somebody gave a very high-end restaurant a very bad review. And, of course, being the good company and the good restaurant management that they are, they followed up when they saw this bad review and said, what do we do to deserve this? We would love to make it right. And the guy said, I called you guys when I was in town to make a reservation, and you were booked every single night. I couldn't get in. I just can't believe, that it was that hard to get in. And that's why he gave them a bad review, because he couldn't get in. And it's like that had nothing to do with anything, and yet, it hurts. So, but it's important that when there is a review, that the customer is responded to. And by the way, a review on a social site like a Yelp or a TripAdvisor is social. Everybody can see it. Therefore, you need to think that way. So, show them that you responded. Show them that what the explanation was, and get on there and interact. You don't want to have an argument with the customer, so you can pull it offline. And when it gets resolved, get back online and say, hey, glad we were able to work things out. Thanks for the opportunity. And in the perfect world, the customer's going to come back on and say, you know what, hey, I appreciate following up with you. I'm glad you guys stepped up. That's not the question you asked, though. You asked how important online reviews are. And I kind of started to get into that. Online reviews are important to your reputation. It's that simple. What should you do about them? As I mentioned, you respond to every single one of them. I have a good friend, Jay Bear, wrote a book about, it's called Hug Your Haters, and it's about the online world and all the complaints that some of these people have. But when somebody makes a complaint, it's an opportunity to show how good you are when you respond. And by the way, if somebody gives you a compliment, it is just as important to respond to them as well, because everybody deserves a response. The customers love it when you interact with them. And when you do that, it just creates more engagement and a better connection.
Shep, amazing insight. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.